We solve problems every day. Those can be very everyday simple problems such as what to wear this morning, and to very complicated, very vital for us, for our future, problems such as what career to choose. Problems are multiple and we provide solutions to those problems, but how good or bad the solution would be depends on the type of decision making that we apply. It also really is determined by the critical thinking level that we apply to solving those problems. Let me define what solving problems or problem solving as a term means. Problem solving is an act of defining a problem, determining the cause of the problem, identifying, prioritizing, and selecting alternatives for a solution, and implementing that solution. Without critical thinking, problem solving becomes less effective, and you may fail to identify the root cause of the problem and overlook important information. So critical thinking is a skill that you need for effective problem solving. There are two types of decision making. The first one is called intuitive decision making. And intuitive decision making is when we rely on our gut feeling, on our intuition, and we do not follow a certain structured process. Data-driven or rational decision making is the opposite of intuitive decision making. According to rational decision making, there is a procedure, there is an objective structure that we have to follow. It includes identifying a problem to solve, gathering facts, identifying options and outcomes, analyzing them, and considering all the relationships while selecting or coming up with a decision. Let me bring you an example of an intuitive decision-making solution. Well, creative tasks such as writing, art, or music can be the best ones where you should apply your intuitive decision making. Also, intuitive decision making is helpful when we are in an emergency situation, when we have to go with our gut, with our feelings, with our intuition for quickly solving the problem. Some people believe that intuitive decision making is not professional and rational decision making should apply to professional environments. They are not always right, and we will discuss that in a moment. Rational decision-making situation can be ranging from starting a business, let's say, or again, selecting a career. Those are very important ones, and we should go through certain steps to make a decision and to come up with a good solution. Examples of situations where you need to apply rational decision making can include business, calculating the cons and pros of a business, making a strategic decision on sales or expansion of a company, advising a client, advising your student or your child on a serious issue. So there is a system to follow, which we will be talking about too. When do we need intuition? Decision-making situations where intuitive approach can help most include the following. Expedited decision-making or rapid action is required during that type of decision-making. When we have fast-paced change, also intuitive decision-making is useful. When the problem is poorly structured, intuitive decision-making is also helpful. The factors and rules that you need to take into the account are hard to articulate or are ambiguous. You need to deal with ambiguous, incomplete, and completely unknown information for you. Or, in other words, if there is no precedent. Also, you should go and apply the intuitive decision-making technique. To make a decision intuitively means to go with the option that satisfies your emotional reaction. What are the advantages and disadvantages of intuitive decision-making? Advantages include speed. Intuitive decisions are very quick and they have to be made in fast-paced emergency situations at times. They are efficient because they do not require as much of a process and as much of a time and resource spending as the situations where you need to apply rational decision making. They can be flexible. Why? Because the inputs into this decision making might be changing fastly, and thus you cannot really apply a rigid structure, and you need to be flexible in providing inputs when you're making this decision. Finally, creativity is the advantage of decision making that is intuitive, that goes when you go with your gut for making this decision. Intuitive decision making can lead to out-of-the-box, non-standard solutions, and that's what makes intuitive decision making good. The disadvantages of intuitive decision making can include the following. First, limited information. We are making our decisions based on no or very limited information, and thus the decision is not enriched with all the data that we need. The second disadvantage of intuitive decision making can be bias. Why? Because we are looking at the situation through our own prism, through our own perspective, and our perceptions and our biases can affect how we view this situation before making this intuitive decision. The third one is risk. It might be really risky because we don't have enough information. And then lack of transparency. It is very difficult to explain, to justify why you made this decision. What does a rational decision making mean? Rational decision making, as we said, is the process of decision making that is based on a systematic, logical approach, application of certain toolboxes. There are advantages and disadvantages to a rational decision making, and those advantages include objectivity, because you are gathering all the information and you kind of get rid of the subjective items, the subjective approaches. Clarity, it is very clear because it follows a certain structure, it's organized. Consistency, because you follow certain steps and you can go back, and the results that you will get by following the same structure, the same methodology, the same process are becoming consistent. There is a higher probability that if you follow the same structure, you will arrive at a same result time and time again. Finally, accountability. It is really important when you are going to report on the solution or when you are going to explain was the process to go through the rational decision making rather than intuitive one. The disadvantages of rational decision making obviously would include that they are very time consuming. You have to go through the process, which takes time and resources. You can have still limited information, right? You can have the process, you can have the structure, but the inputs might be lacking because of the nature of the problem that you are trying to solve. Also, the rational decision making by its nature is rigid. It's not flexible enough. It is a certain structure, certain set of steps that you absolutely need to follow. It makes it not flexible. Finally, the people or the situations where we are applying rational decision making, they tend to be not only time consuming but also overcomplicated. The series of steps might sometimes not be necessary. Let me describe to you one technique for rational decision making, and it is very easy to remember because all sections or all steps of it, they start with letter D. The first section is define, and here you want to identify a problem that you are trying to solve. What is the problem? Well, how do we define the problem? Problem is basically an itch. It is something that you want to scratch and you want to get rid of. Problem is something that creates a pressure, and it is something that is agreed upon that is making some kind of or creating some kind of a discomfort. So a good identification of the problem is very important before you start the entire process. So define what the problem is. The second section is called diagnose, and it includes several steps. The first step of diagnosing is identification of the decision-making criteria. What does that mean? Decision-making criteria are the items that are going to be determining the success of your solution. Or in other words, what is it that is important for you? What is it that you're going to be considering, taking into consideration while making the decision or while choosing the alternative? So identification of decision-making criteria is also very, very important part. Allocation of weights to this criteria is also important. Why are we saying this? Because not all the criteria are equally important in your decision making. Development of alternatives, the first step of the design. Now you're designing a solution. Development of alternatives might be based on market research, data collection, negotiations, and when you're making a rational decision, you really want to have several alternatives to choose from, and those several alternatives further would be checked against the criteria that you have set, and that would give you an enough database and enough measurability or logos, so to say, to arrive to a good rational decision. Analysis of alternatives and selection of the best one from those alternatives are the two actions that belong to the decide phase. The fourth phase, the fourth D, is analysis of alternatives and selection of an alternative. And finally, the final step of rational decision making is called do. It's when you pick the best of those alternatives. Usually it is a numerical best because you have to multiply and add the items and the qualification, the criteria, and the best, the highest graded, the highest ranked alternative would be something that you want to take and implement, do. So that is the process that usually people follow their rational decision making. Also is one item that some people forget to do. After some time, after the decision has been made, after the alternative has been selected and implemented, really want to go back and see, was it a good decision? Going back and analyzing or evaluating the decision effectiveness is a very important kind of post-decision action step that people really want not to forget. There is an example that I suggest that you do, and the case is that you have to open a business and you have noticed that there is a trend for wellness, for health, for wellness awareness and so on, and you see that more and more people, different ages, are really into the health appreciation, and also at the same time you see a problem, you identify a problem that there are not enough brands that can supply for the sportswear, for the people who are concerned with their health to go and exercise. Now that problem has been identified. Now you want to go through the rational decision making with that problem and really give a solution to that problem. What you want to do is, according to our decision making process, you want to identify the decision making criteria. Let those criteria be, for example, the fashionability of the brands, the affordability of those brands, the variety that the brands are offering, the brand coolness, or let's say recognizability, the acquirability, the investment opportunity, and the safe betness or the risks related to bringing this brand to your country. So let's imagine that you set this criteria, and according to our process, you really need to allocate some weights to those criteria. And as we said, not all the criteria are equally important or equally strong in your decision making. So you want to allocate the weights in percentages to each of those criteria. And after you have allocated weights to the criteria, now you want to go into the market and you want to understand what your alternatives are. You want to know, how many are those, and you want to have a good number to select from. After you have information about the alternatives, you want to put those alternatives into the table and weight them according to the criteria. Now, weighting them means putting a grade from 1 to 10, let's say, and then after you multiply those rankings per criteria and weight them according to those criteria, you are ready to sum them up, each of them, and see which one gets the higher grade. And the one that gets the higher grade would be your best alternative. So really, you want to select that best alternative and actually go and implement that criteria, that alternative. And that would be alternative that you really want to implement, to go through the do phase with, and not to forget to, after some time, evaluate how effective that selection was according to the rational decision making. Now let's go into the two ways that people are making, or two, so to say, settings in which people are making their decisions. And turns out to be that the decisions can be made individually or as a group. And again, both of those types, they do have their advantages and disadvantages. Individual decision making is good because that kind of decision making is quick. You really do not have to consult other people. You don't have to gather groups and kind of create brainstorming, spend time on this, spend time on asking other people's opinions. You can make this decision really quickly. It is also flexible because an individual decision maker is free to change the course or to modify his or her decision making process or direction or vector. You are in control of your individual decision making. Why? Because you are the only one. You again do not have to go and check and justify that decision in front of others. So you're in full control. And also you're fully accountable for your individual decisions that you make. The disadvantages of the individual decision making are numerous, and I think they are obvious too, and most of them, they boil down to only one person, you being the decision maker. Why? Because you don't have enough information, you have limited perspective. There is a risk because of that limited character of the information that you use. Why? Because it's your individual decision, right? Yes, of course, you can go and do some research and so on and so on, but still, some additional perspectives from other people would still be helpful. Lack of collaboration is another minus, is another disadvantage of individual decision making. And finally, lack of diversity. It has been a very solid number that diverse teams with a lot of diversity, they usually arrive to better decisions rather than homogeneous teams or individuals. Finally, let's go into group decision making. Let's talk about the benefits of group work, and obviously the advantages of group decision making are diverse perspectives that the group members can offer, more information that you can gather from different sources, including the group members' prior experiences and prior knowledge, reduced bias because people in the group can come with different perspectives and can express different perceptions and ideas, so there is less bias as a result if we have many opinions, and greater acceptance. It is important that the decisions that are made as a group are the responsibility for those decisions is also obviously shared by the group members. Thus, all of those group members, they do accept the decision that they themselves have made. Now let me summarize. Critical thinking is a key component of good problem solving. Critical thinking should be applied while you're making decisions, be those intuitive decision making or rational decision making. More particularly within the rational decision making, when there is a structured way of understanding what the problem is and developing ideas and criteria and so on and arriving to the decision, critical thinking is of utmost importance. Try to apply critical thinking and structures and sometimes intuitive decision making to all the decisions that you are making in your life, and you will see that the result or the quality of those solutions would make you happy. Good luck with your decision making.